Hello, everyone. Welcome. For a moment, let's just imagine a world where legal and procurement don't face risks of cost, efficiency, corporate risk, or regulation. These two teams are really expected to deliver high business value and savings. I'm Mary. I'll be guiding a conversation, but really the stars of the show are going to be Sunil and Ashlyn, and I'll let them introduce themselves in just a moment. Today's webinar will really be discussing building better relationships, better partnerships across the organization, particularly between legal and procurement. And today we'll hear from two of my colleagues who are the most involved in this process at Link Squares and really building it from the ground up. So if you'd both like to introduce yourselves.
Hi, my name is Sunil. I work in finance and strategy directly under our CFO, Luigi Testa. My course stems from technology consulting at Deloitte in the UK. And experience-wise, I've worked in global consultancy firms all the way across to family business. And yes, I have lived and worked with my family, would not advise, mostly on the living part. Here at Link Squares, one of my earlier work streams involved the establishment of our procurement process, starting from scratch, which of course we will dive further into today. It's great to be here and I look forward to our agenda.
Thanks, Neil. My name is Ashlyn Donahue. I'm the Director of Legal here at Link Squares, where I coordinate very closely with Sunil and the rest of our finance team throughout our procurement lifecycle. Prior to my time here, I was at HubSpot, where I was the manager counsel for the vendor global subpractice commercial area. So have some experience with working with teams cross-functionally on the procurement process, and I'm looking forward to discussing further today.
Thank you both. So just to give you a quick rundown of what you can expect on today's call, I just want to present a quick agenda. First, you can expect to hear some challenges and opportunities that actually led to the process we now have at Link Squares for procurement. Then we'll move into why technology plays such an important role in really standing up a program like this. And then lastly, we'll dive into some actionable ways you can take what you learned today and apply it to your own organization. And we will leave some time for a Q&A at the end. So if you have any questions, please drop them right into that Q&A box and we will get to them at the end. And if we don't have time, then we'll reach out to you directly to address those. So let's dive in. Let's take a look at really the experiences that each of you have had in the past, maybe your biggest opportunities to create improvements or operational improvements in your management processes.
Yeah, sure. So based on my previous experience, I've actually operated a procurement factory for numerous fast-paced M&A IT projects. So this took most of my time up at Deloitte. Another project I worked on involved the sourcing of all third-party vendors, so A to Z, for a new joint venture company. And that used a structured RFP process. So I have a fair bit of experience in different scenarios to ultimately help create a bed for process creation and also improvement here at Link Squares. Over to you, Ashlyn.
Yeah, I think that from my experience, one of the most foundational ways that you can optimize the way that you're running your procurement lifecycle is to really think about where you have opportunities to collaborate cross-functionally more effectively. So making sure that you're communicating and discussing things in a centralized location or have really tight relationships around who needs to be involved and when. I think, one of the areas you want to try to avoid is creating silos in your process where teams are going off and doing things in a singular fashion without connecting, to really bring that full picture view of whether or not this engagement is approved from a finance perspective, security. So really thinking about how you can optimize that through your processes and systems.
Great, thank you.
We are currently at 400 plus. So back then, we didn't really have a procurement process. It was mostly run by our CFO and CEO and other executives for more specialist purchases. I believe we had an outside counsel. We did in-house negotiations, and it was a case of getting what you need in the shortest time possible. People spend a lot of time on activities they shouldn't be doing, and optimization generally was was quite difficult with a smaller company. It's also worth noting Finalize didn't exist back then. However, ingestion into Analyze was happening, but lacked a sense of direction. So where did we start? So the journey started by working backwards from Analyze. So contracts were making their way into the repository, but the big question was how exactly. So this led me to carry out a review on people, organization, process, and technology. And the main challenge here was essentially building a framework that works for all with the resources available. So most importantly, collaborating with legal on this process. So when Finalize turned up, even through early development, we seamlessly transitioned into organized and purposeful workflows fairly easily. So yeah, that's kind of the journey from when we were a 60 to 70 person company. So yeah, curious to hear Ashlyn's thoughts.
Yeah, and Sunil, as you know, joined a little bit after you. And one of the first initiatives that I worked on here at LinkSquares alongside you is to really think about what does our procurement process look like at a company closer to 400 employees, which is a little different than 60. So one of the things that we undertook was really to think about how we could consolidate and optimize the workflows that we had and ensure that with our expanding business and growing teams, we had all the right folks looped in and at the right times. And so really optimize the way that we're getting those requests into Finalize and then how we're able to track certain data points that are important to us and analyze by being intentional about the questions that we're asking up front to not only facilitate review, but intentional about the questions that will then drive data on the back end in our Analyze platform.
Great, thank you both. And for each of your departments, do you have a specific mindset when it comes to contracts? Specifically, does it stay within one team? Who needs to be involved? Really, what do those activities for contracting look like?
So we're a smaller legal team here at LinkSquare, so we all sort of pitch in and support the review from the procurement process as needed for incoming requests that our business partners may have. I think it really depends on the size and structure of your team and your company as to what the best fit is going to be. It also is kind of dependent on the volume that you're intaking and what the competing priorities might be. So for larger companies with larger legal functions, they may elect to split out review for vendor contracts to a very specific group of folks within legal and ensure that that those folks are really dedicated and focused on that procurement review to make sure that there's no competing priorities at end of month with any revenue contracts or anything of that mix.
Right. Yeah. So when you say specifically, does it stay within one team? Absolutely not. I think I see it as a combined effort. Everybody wears a legal operations hat, I think, not just legal. And I think the collaboration is a must between like procurement, legal, and the business, with a strong focus on process. So I think a question here is like, how do we make this as easy as possible for us and everybody involved in the process? It's as simple as that. Contracts are everywhere. Contracts are in some way everybody's responsibility. For example, software and tooling, it all impacts a business function one way or another.
Thank you. And how do you eliminate the back and forth? Maybe not totally eliminate it, but keep it to a minimum between the departments.
Yeah, I can kick off this. I think defining the process is fundamental. And like I mentioned before, collaboration with legal, making sure it works for both groups, and achieving full business alignment on where the process actually starts. Because I think I found it a challenge in terms of people reaching out on Slack or trying to look for a documentation. So I think finding that starting point is absolutely key. And having all the relevant guidance and information from the beginning, and with a strong focus on enablement too, like help the stakeholder through the process, make it easy, simple things such as company name, payment terms, billing schedules, they can all be set correctly before legal gets their hands on the contract.
Yeah, I totally agree, Sunil. And I think, one of the things that I spent a lot of time when I first joined was being thoughtful about having discussions with Sunil and other members across the business who are involved in the procurement lifecycle to really understand what was important to them. When did they need to be involved? When did they want me to reach out to them, and for what types of matters, right? Whether it's billing cadence and net payment terms. And so I think really thinking through and understanding your business partner's goals and priorities helps you be a stronger partner to them throughout that process. And then, to Sunil's point, making sure you're getting the right information, being intentional about making sure the questions you're asking are going to provide each of those teams the information they need to kick off their review, but also enabling your business partners at the front end with the information they need, because it really starts before they've ever looped us in.
I think it'd be interesting to hear if the process is different for maybe a vendor agreement or any agreement that comes from marketing, for example. Does that process differ at all between teams?
So a little bit. So the way that we have structured is really thinking through SaaS contracts that we're purchasing and the types of information that we might need as it relates to them versus contracts that are non-software purchases and what type of information we might need as part of that. And so being mindful about tailoring the questions that you have based on the type of engagement that's being requested. Like, for example, a sponsorship contract for marketing, we might need different information to kick off our internal review process than for a software agreement or perhaps for licensing for marketing content. And I think that rings true on what teams might need to be involved in the review process at all. It's dependent on the type of engagement or why you're working with that third party.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, that's exactly how we've kind of structured it, software and non-software. Ultimately, all the, every agreement will end up in the final destination being analyzed. But I think it's key to kind of understand that a marketing agreement for an advert or an event will take a different route to something that is software. And as Ashley mentioned, it's all about like impact on the business, kind of understanding if something is on the cloud, what are the risks and to the business. It's one where IT security will need to have like a weigh in on how that agreement looks. So yeah, I think we definitely don't channel everything into one route. We vary it, so we have two, which makes it way more easy to customize.
And at a company of over 400 people, there are a lot of priorities going on. What's the process look like when there are so many things going on? How do you arrive at a common goal between the two teams and then beyond, really, throughout the entire company, focusing on those business objectives?
Yeah, so this is where, powering, the power of partnership with your procurement team is just so critical. We communicate regularly leading up towards end of month or end of quarter to really understand what are going to be the priorities from a procurement perspective, making sure that we are engaging our business partners early to let them know to submit requests, and really leaning on the procurement team to help us kind of weed through the requests that we might be receiving at any given point in time to say, from a legal perspective, here are the things that are top of mind for the business for this month. Here's how to prioritize and stack rank them, and being that partner and helping to determine that.
Yeah, totally. And I can maybe speak more broadly. So I think collecting data points along the way, for example, close dates. So there's no need to re-engage every workflow in terms of working out where the priority sits in terms of timelines. And I think making evaluations autonomous. So avoiding the need to ask further questions, like having the data there in the first place helps gauge priority. Open communication channels is another one, simple but super effective. For example, shared Slack channels, or even a Slack channel where people can ask questions should there be. And yeah, just more broadly, there shouldn't be any barriers to ask questions and check in. If there are, everyone loses out. And I think further to this, there should be an agreement on accountability and SLAs, signature turnarounds, for example, and business continuity is key. It's having coverage plans when people are out, or if the signer is not available for specific days, whatever it is, having a backup always makes things move more smoothly, especially when they need prioritizing. I think we can go with the classic saying, right? Get everybody singing from the same song sheet, and that really does help, prioritize the million priorities that we all go through.
Thank you. I think that kind of brings me to my next point, actually, about what do you find most important when it comes to those open lines of communication? Obviously, I know we use link squares, but how do you utilize that to make sure that everybody is on the same page?
I think to Sunil's prior points, right? Having the system behind our process, collecting key data points as part of the intake flow really enables us to optimize not only our business partners' engagement and experience in the procurement process, but also the way that we can collaborate together and provide them the information they need to move forward. It reduces the back and forth that we may otherwise have to even just ask questions as simple as, when do you want to sign this contract by? Or, what exactly is this engagement for? We collect all of that up front very intentionally, and streamline and automate the approval process based on the type of request and the nature of what's being done, so that we can ensure that the right folks are getting looped in automatically without having someone to sit there and say, okay, for X type of request over, Y dollars, I need to loop in finance. That all occurs naturally as part of our process. And so it doesn't require an end user to know all of the ins and outs of the procurement process they might not be going through very regularly. And it also kind of enables us to focus our time and optimize our resources internally elsewhere, because we know that we have a great system helping to provide us that core information and system automation.
Absolutely. Yeah, I think enabling a prescriptive process, right? Knowing what's coming next, and more importantly, where to start. I think technology enables us to embrace automation, create the approval workflows that lead from one to the other. I think making technology be the GPS, for all stakeholders, clearing out all the early hurdles. And I think a key aspect on bringing out like key points for legal and procurement to review. Just what Ashley mentioned was using questions and answers that are defined for each template that are relevant. And that leads on to the approval process. So set the order, get the right people invested. Sometimes it's purely training that gets people excited and aligned on using technology for quite classic processes.
Definitely. Thank you. And as someone in marketing who submits a lot of these, I can say I definitely appreciate the process as well. Awesome. So is there any more information that you can give the audience really about how this process can help cost and time savings?
Yeah, of course. So we use our entire platform end to end. Internally, I feel we're getting the most value from what link squares can offer. We have no manual data transfers apart from data entry at the very beginning. So these are the question and answers as part of the template. And I feel like we're using every automation feature, I think, is gold. It will save every stakeholder time and effort, and really reduces the cost of context switching, which is so easy. We're behind a laptop all the time, and things come up, and yeah, I think automation really helps smoothen that out. So we have finalize flowing through to analyze, and the operations is essentially driven by the platform. We have meaningful and timely notifications, which I think is enhancing productivity within legal, procurement, and on the stakeholder side. We have all our audit trails, they're all there. Should we need to look back, it's very easy to do so. We don't need to reach out to people for further information. It's all in one place. And we can run reports on customers and vendor agreements in minutes. It's all there. It's all within our all our fingertips. And I'd say we're practically already prepared for any future activity should it come about. We can run these reports. We've got all the data points there that can help us prepare for any requests that may come up. And I think we are saving on outside counsel, which is how we were operating previously. And this has saved us on having to accommodate any additional third-party operations. So having to do things the way an external party would like us to. So I think, through all those points, there is definite cost and time savings there, which we are definitely benefiting from.
And just to add from my perspective, one of the things that I really appreciate about the way that it's structured internally, in addition to everything that Sunil just outlined, is that I know that finance has approved this from a budgeting perspective. I know the right senior or executive leadership for that business team has approved from a budgeting perspective, and that this meets what their expectations are from a cost and purchasing experience, but also meets what their expectations are just from a financing payment terms perspective. And so having that easy without me having to go ask the question in the tool based on the approvals that I can view, it just saves me so much time and saves Sunil and other stakeholders time because I don't have to go ask that question. I know the answer.
Can you think of any items, that we want our audience to walk away with today to take back to their teams?
Yeah, from a key takeaways perspective of things to think about as you're looking to optimize your process and system are to really define what is going to meet your organization's needs. And that's going to evolve over time. And you're going to want to be adaptable and ensure that you're regularly checking in and following up if your process needs to adjust. Maybe it's because you've onboarded new folks. Maybe you have, adjusted the way that you want to internally work together. I think that is something that's important as part of any process and system build out, is to just maintain that level of flexibility and adaptability as your organization grows. I also think just being really intentional about understanding everyone's goals and objectives throughout the process for all of your cross-functional business stakeholders, and that includes the requesters, to make sure that you can connect with them in the most optimal way possible through your use of systems and tools.
Yeah, absolutely. And I'm very much adding to what Ashlyn said there. I'd say, don't be afraid of technology carrying process. It really works. You just have to work it, which takes time and effort. I think having a strong grip on the benefits and, making it super clear to all stakeholders why this process exists and how it benefits them. And I can't say it enough. It's all about making it as easy as possible. I think one of the most important points I'd say is, as process related, is enabling the process to evolve. So never stand still. Improvements are warmly welcomed by stakeholders instead of it seeing as a point of change. It's a sign that the business cares and has a strong focus on the well-being of internal stakeholders through a somewhat complex process. So I think any changes that are aligned with improvement are warmly welcomed. I think that's a key point to take away there.
Do you have any suggestions for people who may need some help with really that adoption of processes in terms of change management or anything like that?
I think that it's, to Sunil's point about providing the context behind the why and what it is going to do to improve or optimize their experience in the process. And you can do that a few different ways, and you probably want to not just use one channel to provide that information to your requesters or stakeholders, but things like going on a roadshow as you've made updates to your process or as you're launching it, and talking to folks about it, giving all of that context, doing live demos of how it's going to function in practice, sending newsletters, creating enablement pages and resources that are available to the business for not only the folks that are there today, but as your teams grow, for the folks who join down the line, to really have an understanding of what it looks like, but the backbone of why you've structured it that way to start. I think it's important to have that for the go forward process. Otherwise, as you bring new folks on, they might understand the process, but they might not really get the why, which enables them to really buy in many ways to what you're trying to achieve there.
I know a lot of times the procurement does their own RFP when looking for a vendor. And I know at LinkSquares, we do it a little bit differently. Our marketing, for example, might look for a software, do our own due diligence on it, and then come to the procurement team with that offer. Do you think that will ever change? What's that process look like? Do you have any experience differently?
Yeah, for sure. With my previous experience, I've designed and carried through a procurement factory that did involve an RFP process, especially on the project where it involved creating a joint venture business for two parents and sourcing A to Z of everything. There was a robust RFP process where you would tender out to like 3 vendors, or even more, and then come down to 3. So I think you don't need to start with that level of structure. I think, yes, internal stakeholders, if they're doing their own evaluation on a tool for demand gen, such as lead generation, there are multiple vendors out there. But I think when you're a small business, it's okay for stakeholders to make that evaluation, because obviously it'll be closer to how they're working today, or at that point in time. But I think, yes, there is definitely a growth plan to kind of incorporate a more robust structure, especially when it comes down to RFPs. And I think it's a maturity thing. It's where you are in the journey, and the resources that you have to stand up a process like that. There needs to be an assessment on, okay, what do we have? Can we stand this up? Great. Let's make it happen, and let's educate the business and the stakeholders on this is the way we're now going to carry out the process, and the why, and making sure the benefits are clear.
Great. Thank you. Well, let's hop into Q&A then. So the first question that came in, where do you really start, especially at a small company? I'm guessing, those who maybe don't have a fully built out procurement team, or even maybe a legal team of one.
So I think that for where I would start is to really understand kind of what the purchasing has been to date. What types of things are you most working with third parties for? Is it software? Is it event contracts? Is it, sponsorship agreements? Having that discussion with finance and legal, I think, enables you to have conversations around how you want to best structure your workflows and processes, and also what other stakeholders might need to be looped in from an approvals and review perspective. And I think it all goes back to really thinking through, we've talked a lot about this today, those questions. Can't really define those necessarily without a full understanding of what it is you're defining them for. So I might ask very different questions for a software purchase, like what data are we sharing? How are we sharing it? That's not necessarily going to apply to an agreement for an event where we're hosting a event for the company. And so really being mindful about that enables you to kick off, at least the first step, which is documenting what is it that you need to know as part of this process, and who needs to be looped in.
Yeah, there are multiple ways of starting a procurement process, and I think one way, as I mentioned before, is working backwards from analyze. And as Ashley mentioned, assessing the agreement structure, what are the things we're handling day to day, and which are the ones that you trigger off most often, and then kind of tailoring the approach or the design of the process to accommodate those in the present or in the short term. and then widening that to capture everything in the long term. Or I think another approach is identifying all the current buyers in the business and workshop your way up. So get those people in the room, understand who's who and what are they looking for on a regular basis, or what software they manage, or what are the typical agreements that they handle, and carrying out the review on people, POPIT, right? People, organization, process, and technology. That always seems to like capture the entire ecosystem of contracts within a business.
Great. Thank you. I think we have time for one more question. And this one is more about, again, how the two teams work together, but more so what the handoff process looks like. So do you have a handoff process, and what does it look like, if so?
Yeah, sure. So our handoff process is very much embedded in our platform. So we use agreement approvals, which is ordered. And for software, for example, we kind of bleed in IT security, legal, and procurement. And IT security and legal kind of operate at the same time to keep the wheels moving. And then once legal have finished their review, the next approval is basically procurement, which would do a run through of the terms, the payment terms, making sure they're in order, and would have finance buy-in into the approval process. And then it kind of rolls forward into the signatory process, which procurement handles and makes sure that the right recipient data has been captured, and the signee on internally is warmed up. So yeah, we just generally we use our platform to move between the different parties and the approvals required.
Great, thank you. I think that's all we have time for today. So I just want to thank everybody for joining the call. And I especially want to thank Ashlyn and Sunil for joining me today to talk about legal and procurement. We put these on monthly, all different topics. And if you're looking for any more information about this topic or any others, you can find that on our resources section on our website, www.linksquares.com. Everybody have a great day. Thank you.